So this first study is about, let me zoom here. There we go. This first study is about the value of conflict management training and raising manager confidence. And it's a very interesting it seems somewhat obvious to me what the results of the study came out to be, but very good nonetheless. I think it's very applicable to our services here. And so the question here is, how does conflict management training impact the confidence managers have of their conflict knowledge? And the author distributed a 3-part questionnaire via email to 300 managers of different organizations in Bulgaria of different sizes. And they asked whether they received conflict management training before from their organization. They were asked to evaluate themselves and how prepared they felt, how confident they felt in 10 different conflict management key areas, which are listed on the results page. So we can look at that in a second. And then they gave demographic information. And what they found from this is that as for the first question, whether they had conflict management training or not, only 14% of the managers out of the 300 studied surveyed have received conflict management training from their organization. The majority of those come from large organizations. The very large organizations at 27%, 27% of the people that had conflict management training, 5.7% of small organizations had given training. It seemed like the closer that these organizations were to the capital, they were more likely to give conflict management training, so more urban versus rural. And then in terms of the second question, in terms of the conflict management key areas, managers who have been trained were significantly more likely to feel confident in their knowledge of 9 out of the 10 conflict management categories. And so these 10 categories are listed here. So it's the nature of conflict in organizations, different types of conflict, sources of conflict, structure and dynamics of conflict, individual behavior in situations of conflict, conflict management strategies, the outcomes of conflict for organizations, the analysis and diagnosis of conflict, the analysis of post-conflict situations, and forecasting and prevention of future conflict. And so managers were significantly more confident in all of these areas except for the analysis and diagnosis of conflict. And so ultimately this study, legitimizes, and this is a key takeaway, the effects of conflict management training as it leads to more competent, conflict competent managers. Organizations who don't provide any type of conflict management training should do so, considering the costs of workplace conflict, and that's kind of where we come in. So I felt this was pretty straightforward, and it kind of makes sense that people who get conflict management training would know about conflict management. So interested to hear what you all think too.
Yeah, definitely pretty straightforward. I think that, confidence or efficacy is a straightforward predictor of performance and of the ability to sort of enact certain behaviors. So the fact that they're confident in it, hopefully would probably help them perform better as conflict managers. But of course, they didn't measure the actual behaviors, so we don't know for sure whether that would lead to them being better able to handle conflict. So that'd be another interesting thing to measure if there's a way to measure that.
No, what if they received training from a source outside of the organization? Did it say anything about that?
No, I think it was just in-house. That was all that they measured. Yeah, but that would have been good. Something to consider.
Yeah, this is, like you said, Noah, I think a straightforward study that kind of validates our work and shows the benefits of the work that we do. I think just creating a space to talk about conflict, i.e. the training, is absolutely going to increase the skills and the awareness of it, right? Because I think so many of us, unless you're in this field or unless you've gone through a training, you don't talk about conflict in a light, right? You talk about it as, oh, it's like a bad thing. It's, or you don't talk about it at all. So I think just, and to connect with Jeremy's point about like the confidence, I think that comes through just talking about it. right? So, yeah.
Well, it's interesting too, like that, how few people get this sort of training, when you'd think that this, along with just maybe basic leadership training, would be some of the key things that leaders should be trained on, or at least people in the organization should be trained. I wonder if there's some, I mean, there's probably no meta analysis that looks at the correlation between the number of people trained in an organization and the amount of conflict in that organization, but it would be an interesting thing to know.
Yeah.
If more people are trained, or is there less conflict, or are conflicts handled more effectively?
Yeah. Well, and the fact that this is also what surprised me here too is that these aren't, it's not only employees. Like this is focused on leadership and management, where you think that would be a more common, at least a more common place to receive conflict management training. But the fact that only 14% have received it was a surprising fact to me, and I think that would be
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also think like the whole concept of doing conflict training is new, right? But earlier, good managers, like they would still rely on a lot of books or literature that's just related to leadership and just managerial skills that would involve conflict resolution skills, but maybe they weren't explicitly called so. And it's something that people developed on the job, right? Like the whole theme of people skills probably did involve a lot of conflict resolution skills as a whole, but maybe it wasn't called that. So it's just like another keyword. But if the research is actually showing that those who didn't explicitly get conflict training, how they felt, how confident they were about these skills, like if there's a direct correlation, then maybe those people skills or the whole idea of learning on the job wasn't as effective.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I wonder if they somehow controlled for that. Probably not. I mean,
Yeah.
Because you're right. Because like, it'd be interesting to know how many of them got leadership training, because I think in a lot of leadership trainings there is some aspect of conflict management, even if they don't really call it that necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And even to correlate it with attrition, like you said, if you look at how in an organization, how many people have been trained in conflict management, how many conflicts are there, but also look at how much attrition is there. Because if a lot of people are leaving, which is something I hear of in my environment, like if a friend's not happy at their workplace, they're like, yeah, a lot of people aren't happy, a lot of us are leaving, it's a bad environment, XYZ is really making it hostile for us. So I think attrition is also an interesting indicator to correlate this with.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting even thinking about our services, like if we're able to, we're just implementing our levels 1 through 4 evaluations on our training to see like how it's affecting people, what the results are in their sort of everyday interactions. But it would be interesting to go up to that level 5, which is the ROI, which is if the company could provide some metrics in terms of what is their current attrition rate, and then we do a training, and then 12 weeks later we measure it again, or something. We have some metrics that make sense, and just see like, what was there an effect here, if we can control for other variables during those 3 months. But
no, are these like managers across disciplines? Because I would imagine like HR managers might have received the training, whereas like an IT manager or a manager of a different discipline or department may not have. And I feel like that could make a difference too.
Yeah.